In Houston's first game in over a week, they were outworked, out-rebounded, and out-physicaled, but not outscored. They knock off Middle Tennessee State 69-60.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. Thank you for making us your first listen post-game, your first listen the next morning, or anywhere in between, and making the Locked On Sports Podcast Network the number one sports podcast network in the world. Houston does hold off Middle Tennessee State 69-60. It was not pretty, but it got done. Houston is ending non-conference play 12-1, I should say, 12-1, 7-0 at home, heading off to Cincinnati in the new year. Quite a 2025 it's been, and it's hard to feel celebratory given some of the efforts out there. But in the end, I guess it's good to get a tough win when it's not your best night. Let the comments flow in. We got some questions from the subtext, the all access thread as well to hit later in this episode. But I want to open up by talking about this slow start and Houston getting just out physicaled along the way here. Then talk about some standout performances, answer some of those questions. And last but not least, try to talk about if this team is ready for the Big 12, as weird as that is to think about at this point. Houston wins 69-60. This episode is brought to you everybody's over at Game Time. You get tickets to get on the action. Game Time is there to help the lowest price. Last tickets guaranteed. Check them out. Now, Houston, look, we talked about you in the All Access Everydayer group. So shout out to that crew. If you want to go sign up for that, you can go to, I guess the Houston Cougar specific one is lockedoncougs.supercast.com or lockedonpodcast.com/everydayer to get inside that club. But they got a quick 10-minute blurb where I basically said, hey, Middle Tennessee State's going to be big, play big. And thus far, they've been kind of a middle-of-the-road three-point shooting team. Against Houston, they shot the ball 39% from behind the arc, which is almost 8% better than they are in the season, and they were still really big. They out-rebounded Houston 33-31 in a low-possession game that really made a big impact. I would also stress that they had 22 defensive rebounds, 11 offensive rebounds. Just felt like Houston... While Houston could get some offensive rebound, 22 defensive rebound, whatever, Houston was going to give up an offensive rebound. It felt like every other time down the floor to Middle Tennessee State. And while the stats didn't quite bear it out to be that bad, it did not work for Houston that way. Now, credit where credit's due. Middle Tennessee State, well-coached team, executed their jobs throughout the night very, very well. Really impressed by the Texan Chris Loof from Leander, Texas, who did spend a prep year at Link Academy. Yes, the same Link Academy that gave Houston Chris Cenac. Their center before him was Chris Loof. Loof just dominated, it felt like, inside, even when he wasn't grabbing the rebound. And he did, I should point out, have just 6 rebounds. He was causing so much chaos and, frankly, absorbing a lot of physical contact where it felt like he was responsible for a lot more rebounds. He had a couple threes in this one as well. A big, big force on the inside. Kamari Lands was the shooter who got hot. He was their best three-point shooter coming in. He was on scouting report for that. But Kamari Lands was 4 of 7 from behind the arc, and he hit some deep shots that really hurt Houston's defense. Alec Oglesby also went 4 of 9 from behind the arc. And again, this is a team that shot a middle-of-the-road 32% from 3, just under 32% for 3 coming into this game, and they shot 39% on Monday night. And for what it's worth, there were stretches where they were actually much hotter than that. A couple of stretches of missed shots made it feel more like 39%. There was periods where it felt much worse. And Houston was caught off guard, I think, a little bit by the physicality of this. It looked like a team that was still, as I said, in the short going into this, working off of that Christmas ham. They played very physical. Houston played very like, oh, we're back to playing basketball, kind of now looking kind of basketball. I think also that for what it's worth, the scouting report from Middle Tennessee State clearly knew what to expect, and it looked like to me they were inviting Houston double teams. And this will probably lay out some sort of a blueprint for Houston to have to spin off of. And that's the chess match that is a season, right? Other teams get film, other teams watch video. But ultimately, it was interesting to see that it felt like Middle Tennessee State was inviting Houston double teams both in the monster position and in the slot, or that 15-foot from the baseline and above the three-point line break area. And in both instances, they seem to have like designated spots where when we get doubled here, you go to that spot, I go to this spot, and we're knowing where the ball is going to be rotating. They're almost throwing it blindly to some of those spots at times. And for large stretches of the game, it really worked. Houston made adjustments and made steals out of it, and they kind of slow played the monster a couple times. Ramon Walker had a great play on the baseline coming from the opposite wing to come down to that monster spot. He slow played it, and when the offense player raised up to pass, he like leapt up in the air and forced an errant pass that went into about the third row. It was an impressive adjustment, but I do think that it does be the kind of it felt like the kind of game where, okay, Houston knows that people are going to scout this. Houston knows people are going to work with this and run with this into a bunch of other areas. Now, Houston's offense itself did look lethargic at times, and I think perhaps had Houston had a more clean offensive output, they would have broken into the 70s and 80s and made this a much more comfortable win, but also it would have put more pressure on Middle Tennessee State to kind of score in a hurry. Both of these teams play slow. Houston plays incredibly efficient. That's part of the, Kelvin Sampson mantra is every possession has to count. You're going to go get it off the offensive rebound and make possessions long, find the right shot, and if you don't like it, throw off the backboard to yourself and find another one, right? Ultimately, I think, though, that as you look at this, had Houston had a normal kind of scoring night against these Conference USA kind of opponents, you might have seen even just a normal shooting night, shot 30% from behind the arc. They're up closer to 38, 39%. Typically, that's not great for them. Shot 41%. When you factor in the fact that they had 14 offensive rebounds, you typically see that a couple notches higher oftentimes for Houston, right? And so had they had more clean looks there, this might have never felt that, and Middle Tennessee State might have been rushed and might have had more, frankly, even more turnovers. They had 19 turnovers in this game. I told the All Access members in my preview I thought they'd have 20. I was one shy. Don't get too mad at me. I look, though, at Houston's offense struggling in this. And we'll get some individual highs and lows in the second segment. It looked like to me in the time off between games, they hadn't been working at game speed, bluntly. There were times where we had 3 and 4 drives in a possession where offensive players were kind of running into each other or expecting a drop-off guy and no one's in the dunker spot, or expecting a kick-out guy and the guy is cutting, and just out of sync in a lot of ways. And I saw on the subtext chat and I saw on Twitter people commenting like, that's why you play this game now, is because you just took time off between the Arkansas game in New Jersey, and now people went home for the holidays, and you don't want this to be against a Big 12 caliber opponent where you're this rusty. I think that's absolutely true. I also think, though, that we're not crazy. We've seen as much as Houston focuses on defense and as much energy as Houston expends on defense, and as long as their possessions can get on offense, this is an ugly version of something that no one is unfamiliar with. I do think a big part of this is that you're seeing, some interesting play out of the big man. And we'll get into the specific guys in the second segment. But with Khalifa Sacco out, and they anticipate him being back for Big 12 play, hoping for Cincinnati, definitely by Tech is the goal. With him out, though, and Jojo Tugler getting his fouls early, playing just 26 minutes. He also took an elbow to the chest, had his wind knocked out of him, stuff like that. It was a moment where you felt like Houston was kind of up against it, playing against a team with this much size. This will not be the only team Houston plays this year with big size. Texas Tech will be big. Kansas will be big. Arizona will be big. This is not the only time this test will happen. It's good to work through some of these things now, even if you are doing it shorthanded. Now, there were guys I was really high on in this game, like Mercy Miller. There were guys I was really low on in this game. And I want to get to that in just 1 second. But before we get to all of that, I do want to remind you guys today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Game Time, because college football playoffs are here. Even though Houston's done with their bowl game, beat LSU, other bowl games are happening. Tailgates, packed stadiums, all the action is just so exciting. And the old frustrating part used to be long queues, logins, prices jumping at checkouts when you're trying to buy tickets, and Game Time has flipped the script and given the advantage back to the fans. It's the easy way to unlock amazing college football tickets and experiences in just a few taps. And I can tell you right now, it was a great way to give a gift for the holidays as well. I open Game Time app, look at upcoming games, choose one, surprise how fast and easy it is to find great seats, incredibly easy to use, browsing, buying tickets in just minutes, zone deals, last minute checkout kind of deals, all kinds of great things. And all the prices are right there in front of you. Take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, this code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Welcome back to Locked On Cougs. Thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the post-game, first listen the morning after, or anywhere in between. And for making the Locked On Sports Podcast Network the number one sports podcast network in the world. If you haven't already done it, you got to go check out the Everydayer Club. We got all access members getting all kinds of extra content. You still get the same Locked On Cougs every day for free, available wherever you get your podcast, but all access members get a little bit more access to an ad-free audio feed, invite to the Everydayer Discord server, one-on-one texting with me, and again, some of those special all-access episodes as well. Let's go to lockedonpodcast.com/everydayer to learn more about the program, or go to lockedoncougs.supercast.com if you want to sign up for Locked On Cougs all-access member stuff today. Now, I want to get in some of those questions over the course of this segment. I also talk about some guys I was high on and low on, which kind of ties into the questions, is why I put this all in the same segment. Look, obviously, incredibly high on Kingston Flemings and Emmanuel Sharp. I think that's just kind of the baseline at this point. Those two guys are going to carry this team. Milos Uzan still figuring out that off-ball role a little bit. I thought he looked good in spurts. He's just still trying to find his scoring rhythm. But Kingston Flemings with tremendous dunk, Emmanuel Sharp with tremendous toughness. I don't think he's beat up too bad. He took a nasty spill. He got pushed from behind, ran into a big guy from Middle Tennessee State, and then hit the deck really hard, all in one sequence. And they called the foul. It was called. I do think that he had a heat pack on, and it sounded like, they didn't take him back or anything like that. And I'm sure had this game been more in doubt, he probably would have tried to tough out, or there's a March Madness game or something like that, right? But I think all things considered, plus a big part of his absence meant that Mercy Miller came in, and I thought Mercy Miller looked great. As much as you want to talk about Houston having trouble in this game, Mercy Miller off the bench, just 13 minutes, had 9 points on 4 shots. Thought he was really good and we talked about how in the first segment Houston's offense looked stagnant at times. I thought Mercy did a great job in this one of when that stagnant offense was happening. Hey, ISO, I got the rock. Let's go to the rim, buddy. And he's always been able to do that. He broke 60 in a high school game. He is a tremendous scorer. He is a guy that can hit the baseline midi like it's in his sleep, right? He can do anything and everything with the ball in his hands. And I feel like he's carving out this role. He did it earlier this season as well, where if Houston's offense is starting to lull, you kind of just need to get Mercy in for a few possessions to get the rock in the basket, right? I also thought he, end up earning more minutes tonight by playing very physically sound. He played physical and tough, did not commit a bunch of fouls, had tough rebounds. He had 2 rebounds, but 1 on each end that were both very aggressive and took a lot of physicality to come up with the ball in. Had a great block at the rim in the final minute, had a great drop off to Tugler for a dunk. I thought he really, really played well, and I thought that made it an easy decision to let Emmanuel sit those final minutes with a heating pack on his side. The inverse of this is with Tugler missing early time in foul trouble, Khalifa Sacco on the bench, Cenac came in and had 9 points, 6 rebounds, and I think truthfully, he had a very freshman back from a week or so off of playing games looking basketball game. I think if Chris Cenac were any old freshman, we'd probably not feel so dismissive of his impact on this one. Chris is a 5-star, a lottery pick, a one and done kind of guy. And I want to make sure I get the question right up here. The question I got was, why do I forget sometimes that we have Chris Cenac? And I feel like, to that listener, the Everyday All Access member, props to you, because I think that's a very fair way to look at it. I don't know why the whole screen goes white when I do that, but why do I sometimes forget we have Chris Cenac? It did feel like there were moments tonight where he was just kind of one of the guys out there. And again, if he were a normal freshman, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think the big issue in this one is he's a guy Houston needs to get a lot out of. Obviously, it's hard to be a Jawan Roberts replacement. You don't do that with one guy. You do that with a bunch of guys, and that's the shoes he's trying to step into this season. But his ceiling is so high, and when it looks good, it looks so like Auburn looked so good. Stretches that Arkansas game looked so good against high caliber competition. He dials it up. He's ready to rock, right? It just wasn't there tonight, and it's been several of these games in the first part of the season, this non-conference part of the season, where just it hasn't quite been there, and it makes you worry a little bit. At least makes me worry a little bit about, is it always going to be there? And now, developmentally, as a freshman, it is very normal. I think I wouldn't worry too much about it, but the guy is projected to be in a lot of people's top 10s in the NBA draft, and I think that's because of potential. I think the potential is all there. The consistency is something we're still working on. And honestly, if he's consistent in February, March, April, I don't care if he wasn't consistent in November, December. We just got to get there, right? Like, we got to get there, and I think they got a chance to get there. Another listener question, it also goes all white here, is what does Mercy have to do to get more minutes? What is he missing? I wonder if after tonight you see him get more minutes in a spot against like a Cincinnati next week. Now, I guess that's this weekend. I would stress, though, minutes are a finite resource. They are a zero-sum game. Part of the reason Mercy got so many minutes against Middle Tennessee is because Emmanuel did not, right? Between Milos Uzan, Emmanuel Sharp, and Kingston Flemings, you're going to have to take minutes away from one of those guys to give them to Mercy Miller. And I think that's ultimately because of how well Kingston's played, how well Emmanuel's played, how well Milos has played, even though Milos has not found his way scoring basketball necessarily. I do think that's ultimately like why Mercy is where he is now. Now, when you graduate guys like Emmanuel and Milos, and Kingston may be a pro, and you're looking to replace a bunch of guards next season, it may be the Mercy show, right? Like it is not a done storybook or anything like that. He is just a sophomore. But I think that the deal is tonight is part of the reason he earned so many minutes. To that listener from the Everyday All Access group, part of the reason he earned so many minutes tonight was because Emmanuel wasn't able to take them, and they felt comfortable giving those minutes from Mercy to Emmanuel from Emmanuel to Mercy, I should say, in this spot. Other guys that thought, showed up and showed out tonight. It's hard to say. It was not a pretty effort. I think Tugler in a physical game is going to be fun to watch, and his fouls in the second half felt more tempered than they were in the first half. I gotta see even his second half foul, right? There's a high-low pass from Loof. I think it was down to, what was it? Was it to Alston, to the other big guy? I forget who it was, for a dunk down inside. And Jojo is visibly going to be too late to this ball. He's going to be too late, and he goes to contest at the rim and makes a foul. And honestly, had he had more fouls, that could have been it for him, right? That could have been a bad play. And instead of letting 2 points happen, live and play another day, and understand we're going to need you on the floor more often than not, he commits a foul. And finding that balance is not easy. I don't want to play any game where Jojo has no fouls. That's never going to be the goal. That's not how he plays basketball. That's not how Houston will win basketball games. But it does not feel like he needs to commit all of the fouls he commits. I got a few questions here in the chat as well, talking about Cenac in the NBA and stuff like that. But I want to pull up Kenneth here. Kenneth's a longtime listener. Kenneth says that Mercy was indeed smoking tonight. We need to get some games in conference where he have about 8 guys at that intensity level. I will say, if this were a ranked team, if this were a Big 12 team, if this were frankly a game that was not over the holiday break with a bunch of people in the stands, had a bunch of people wearing red, white, and yelling, I wonder if things would look different. I don't want to get too bogged down into fans and showing up and Christmas holidays and the Middle Tennessee state of it all, but I do think that some of these guys are already looking forward to, or coming off of an Arkansas game. It's hard to not look ahead to the Big 12, and this game kind of occupies a weird in between spot. And give Middle Tennessee State credit, man. They showed up. Their scouting report was on point. They knew where traps and double teams were coming from, and they were really able to spin out of it. I do want to look at Houston and Big 12 play and kind of what we've gleaned from non-conference and what we can take with us into conference play. Before we get too far, though, today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at FanDuel, because Fridays are feeling even different this basketball season. FanDuel's making them even better. With every Friday night before games tip off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the NBA weekend with the NBA's Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before action starts. Fridays from 6 to 7:30 Eastern have become appointment viewing in the NBA Happy Hour. Opening the FanDuel app during Happy Hour always brings something new. It's boosts, bonuses, surprises. Timing is perfect. It's right before games, right before the weekend starts. Adds a little extra energy that Friday night basketball without having to overthink of it. So before tip-off, check out the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 Eastern. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. This NBA Happy Hour only at FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Parker Ainsworth, Locked on Cougs here. Again, I want to thank you for making Locked on Cougs your first listen of the postgame, your first listen next morning, or anywhere in between, and making the Locked on Sports Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network in the world. And reminding you guys to go join the Everydayer Club and the all-access Locked on Cougs membership. Again, you get Locked on Cougs every day for free. That part ain't changing. But if you want more, if you want access to ad-free audio, the members Discord server, the texting with me during the week and before, during, and after games, all of those kinds of things come through the Everyday All Access Club at lockedoncougs.supercast.com. And you can check out all Locked On Podcast Everydayer options at lockedonpodcast.com/everydayer. Lots of great stuff around the Houston area. Lots of great Houston sports teams represented at the Locked On Podcast Network. It's an honor to be with some of those guys. Look, Houston wraps up this one 69-60. And, I think if we were just talking after the Arkansas game, we'd be like, hey, bring on Cincinnati, right? No big deal. The problem now is that, like, okay, how low is this low? Now, look, I will tell you, Galen Robinson on the call. And first of all, I should probably shout out, I'm sure he's talking to Ryan, those guys at their show right now. I thought Galen did great on the call during the ESPN telecast because he didn't feel anything, was noteworthy. And that is to say, like, it felt like a guy that had been doing this for a long time. Weren't a whole lot of moments where I felt like, oh, of course it's this guy's first game. If anything, the only thing I think a critic would say about Galen's performance in the mic tonight was that he kept saying we about the Houston Cougars. And, like, I think he should. He was a Houston Cougar. He's the godfather. He probably should, right? Anyway, that aside, it does feel like guys on the call mentioned this as well. Going to Cincinnati is going to be tough. There's going to be a desperate Cincinnati team. Wes Miller's absolutely on the hot seat up there, right? An interesting roster. They brought back Dizzle James after kicking him off the team and weirdness that's happening around that. We'll preview it before the game happens, but that's going to be a tough game. And then you play them on Saturday the 3rd. You turn on play Tech on the 6th. And while that is at home, we know as well as anyone that is going to be a tough contest. McCaslin has a great program humming up there in Lubbock. It's going to be a tough one. And if we're talking about this game after the Arkansas game, we're like, hey, Houston should feel good. Houston beat Arkansas. Arkansas beat Tech. Bing, bang, boom. Let's roll it out and play. Seeing the lows of things like tonight, though, when the offense looks stagnant, when you have trouble making jump shots, have trouble getting to the rim, size. I think there's a lot of reason to get hesitant very quickly. Now, I'd imagine Houston's favored in the majority of these Big 12 games. I don't think that. Look, I don't think that there's any reason they shouldn't be, for what it's worth. The Arkansas game did happen, right? The Florida State game, the Notre Dame game, the Syracuse game, the Auburn game, those games did happen. This is also that team as well. I am picking Houston to win the Big 12. I want to preface this. I don't think it will be by the multi-game margin each of the last 2 years has been. This is an incredibly deep conference with 4 teams in the top 10. And you only get to play Arizona once. You only get to play BYU once. That means you only get to hand them at most a loss apiece. And I don't know if you can necessarily guarantee you do that or anything like that, right? I just look at this slate and say, okay, which Houston shows up at Cincinnati? I think first Big 12 game will be a big deal. And I started talking about Galen. What Galen said several times is like these first few practices back from the holiday, first practice after a rough game like tonight, he said it on telecast. I'll say it again. Those will be brutal. I don't know which of the guys you know or text or anybody you know from the program. Talk to those guys about Wednesday afternoon about how their legs are feeling. They're going to get worked, and they should get worked. They look like a team that needs to work through the Christmas ham. And I feel like that's okay, right? This is December, and as Sampson has famously said, you don't want to be playing March basketball in December, then you're playing April basketball in January, and then you're in the offseason by February, and that ain't good, right? Doing playing December basketball in December and working towards a goal. I think after watching last year's team and frankly 2022 and 2023 and 2021 and 2020 and 2019 and all the Sampson teams we've seen at this point, they've earned more than the benefit of the doubt, and that this is just the timing of it all, right? This team will be ready for Cincinnati. This team will be ready for Texas Tech, and so on, right? If you go back to the year Marcus and Tremont both got hurt, they looked ugly in the early part of the conference play too. They got it figured out. If you go to when they introduced Jarris Walker as a freshman in 2020, was that 2-3? There were freshmen struggling and growing pains for him. He had 6 blocks in a tournament game, the most blocks that Houston Cougars ever had in a tournament game, right? They got it figured out. I wonder at times what Chris Cenac will evolve into. If you think about him as a Charmander, what does he turn into the Charizard? Where does he finish at the end of this whole Pokemon reference? My other nerds back there. Where does he get to? Where does he take this thing to? I think, though, that Houston's earned the benefit of the doubt and that they're going to make sure that's the highest ceiling possible in his time, right? And I said it within the framework what they do, right? They're not going to let Cenac do a bunch of mid-range ISO kind of stuff. That's not what Houston's ever going to do. But I do think that we can anticipate him hitting a much higher ceiling defensively over the course of the season. Now, do I worry about Tech and Cenac being out there as a big man if we don't have Khalifa Sacco back and Jojo's in foul trouble and stuff like that? Yeah, Toppin's Toppin's an elite big man, and he could have a lot of fun with the freshman defending him. But if Jojo's back there and Cenac is playing off the help side, we're all right, right? So it's going to be about how that game goes and which Houston you get to see. I still think of this team more as the Arkansas Auburn ceilings, more so than this one as a floor. I think this has a lot more to do with the timing of the season and, frankly, a really well-coached and opponent with a great scouting report. And I'm not going to let this one bug me. We've had close games. The year Houston went almost undefeated, wherever that was. Was that also 22-23? First loss of the season was Temple at home. Come on. like that just, anyway, things get crazy, right? Things get crazy. And it's okay. They came up with this one on the win. They're 12-1 at a non-conference play. The Big 12 is a gauntlet. I don't think they're going 18-0, anything like that. I do think, though, this team is ready to make a run at a third straight Big 12 championship. And look, we got more to break down on between now and Cincinnati and throughout the conference play. But ultimately, I think that it's just easy to get down if you got physically beaten up like you did against Middle Tennessee. But I think that just tells you maybe Middle Tennessee is more about that big men lifestyle. They've got some legitimate big guys, and that Loof kid, Torey Alston, who's the other big kid they play? Was it Oglesby? Was that the no? It was Trey Green. They had some real big guys out there, and power to them, kudos to them. I think Houston's gonna be okay. I think this is the reason you play this game is get used to playing those multiple bigs and all of that. So more to you very soon throughout the week. Do want to take a little bit of a break for New Year's and do those kind of things so you enjoy the same. Want to get back to the preview Cincinnati. And then as that transfer portal opens up, there are some names to keep an eye on. Some names that are being sprinkled out to the everyday all access people, but names to keep an eye on in the transfer portal and more. So be sure you hit subscribe, hit the bell so you know when things go live here at Locked on Coogs. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast. Make sure you subscribe and hit like and all the good things. To do so, Locked on Coogs is primarily Locked on Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Coogs.